Okay. All right. So hopefully everybody can hear me. Um, just want to start by saying thanks for even coming because every time I do a similar type of chat like this with a club and the parents of the athletes, certain sports get a huge turnout from the parents, and other sports there's like almost no turnout. So it's definitely very sport specific in terms of culture and when the parents kind of really care about the puzzle pieces around. So 40 people is what Marianne just said was on the call, which is I think is big. So good for you guys. Um, and I wanted to give a little bit of background as to why we're even talking in the first place. Like, why are we even doing this at all? And I'm kind of proud of this background because it's not something that we initiated at all. In fact, Coach Beth searched us out to the point where she was like looking for our building, trying to find us because we don't put our address on the internet. It's kind of more of an exclusive, like hidden thing. The only people coming here are because they're supposed to be here. So we're kind of hidden. And she was like literally looking for our building, but she found the website at least. And then she came to me and was like, hey, uh, you know, I'm a skill coach. I'm teaching girls and guys like how to row, handle position and these types of things, lay back and stuff on the boat, on the erg. Like I'm not a physical coach. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a sports psychologist. And I value these other puzzle pieces. And you guys specialize in this one puzzle piece of physicality and athleticism. So can we work something out where we'd have a dedicated number of roster spots in your program just for our rowers. And anytime you have a sport coach coming to you who's already valuing those other puzzle pieces, like that's already amazing. She's already like light years ahead of so many other skill coaches around. So that was massive, and I was super pumped to be able to oblige her. So that's how we even got connected in the first place. And what some of the other parents whose athletes currently already train here, uh, they recommended like, hey, just can we do like a little simple, not nothing complex, not a long presentation, just a very few simple slides about just training in general, just the whole idea of physicality and athleticism training as its own standalone service and as its own standalone puzzle piece, and just in general, and then kind of tie in some crew examples, and at the end, we could talk specifically, about crew. And so that's what we're going to do here. I'm literally just going to show maybe like 3 slides the most. And I'm going to start super zoomed out, not talking about any particular sport or any particular group of sports. Like we're just talking about just athleticism training in general. And as we go, I'm going to drop in some crew specific examples and things. And like I said at the end, then we'll kind of do some Q&A with Coach Beth and Coach Jared about like this relative to our NorCal team here. So on this first slide, it says 1 of 5, but I'm just going to go over a couple. I'm just going to skip some slides. This is the normal presentation I would give to a parent in a one-on-one setting. In the first slide, I want to talk about the idea of critical or sensitive periods, because there seems to be, particularly in the rowing community, but in other sports as well, there seems to be just somewhat of like a general ignorance as to kind of when you do any kind of physical training intervention, or kind of when athleticism is like a focal point in an athlete's sports career. Like, should that be in childhood, adolescence, or should you wait till they're an adult, like in college, these types of things. And so this idea of critical or sensitive periods helps answer the question of like, when is the right starting time? And the answer is simply, there is no right starting time. There's just a better or worse starting time. And what I mean by that is everybody's familiar with like language and how kids learn languages at certain ages better than when they're adults. Like I have a 2.5-year-old right now, and we're trying to put him in immersion school to learn Mandarin and things like that. Well, my 2.5-year-old will better learn Chinese, by the time from now until he's 5 than he would at age 50 to 53. Like you just learn language better when you're a kid than you can when you're a grown adult. And there's also like a window of learning for math and other things. Well, in the same way that mental attributes have like a certain sensitive period of life, physical attributes also work the same way. And there's also certain stages or ages where certain athletic attributes or components of physicality is a little bit more trainable or less trainable. And so for the average maturing female, okay, for example, the best time to work on flexibility, where it says suppleness here, is somewhere around that 5.5 to 10 years old period. If you train flexibility during this quote unquote window or sensitive period, your ROI is a lot higher. Your rate of decay is slower, like it sticks for longer. This is one reason that gymnastics specializes during this time period. So to say that practically, like if a 7-year-old and a 17-year-old do the same flexibility program, the 7-year-old gets way more out of it because their body just responds better. It's more plastic. It responds better to the intervention than the 17-year-old's body. All right. Best time to work on, I know it says strength here, but we're really talking about like muscle size. Somewhere around that 12 to 15 and a half, 16 years old period for the average maturing female. This is when, sex hormones are raging through your body. So your muscles are going to respond to strength training in a far greater way than they would pre and post that window. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. Like everything is trainable at all stages of life. What we're just trying to make the case here for is that when you're younger, certain things are more trainable. And at certain stages of growth and development of childhood and adolescence, certain attributes, you get more ROI. It lasts for longer. And this is why at our training facility, we start around 8 years old, not because there's anything magical happening at 8, not because there's anything other than the fact we just find they're, psychologically mature enough to be coachable and handle structure. We find 8 years old is about that time where they can handle coaching and structure. And what we want to do is just sequentially check off these boxes as they go. And in theory, that's how you reach your full athletic potential, because you're maximizing the ROI in each one of these sensitive periods. Again, everything is trainable at all stages, but at certain times it's just more. And here's one for males, just to show you it exists. It's a little different. It's shifted by a couple of years because girls hit puberty before guys. There's also another quote unquote advantage that females have when they get their period. That's another sensitive period for certain strength training interventions. And here's everything I just said in chart form. Okay. So the size of the font is how trainable that attribute is. So, I'm talking to some crew parents right now, but just to make the concept even more clear, like forget about crew for a second and just think about some other sport. Like just zoom out and think about some team sport, say a field sport, or court sport, volleyball, or maybe flag football or something like that. And you look at like agility here, okay? Agility is not that trainable when you're 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, but it gets very trainable during those pediatric, early adolescent years, so showing by the size of the font. And then it starts waning off in your later teenage years. Back when I was working in the college setting, back on the East Coast, I would get these 18-year-old freshmen. They're super excited for life. They're like, oh my gosh, we made it, college sports, woohoo, but the amount of trainability and the amount of return we would get after 4 years of dedicated training is just so small. I mean, you're fighting for inches at that stage. And as you get older, if you go on to the pros or you make it to the Olympics, then you're really fighting for inches. You're fighting for small margins of improvement that make all the difference. But at these ages of youth athletes, your body is way more trainable. And that's why in this business, we just focus on youth athletes. It's just, we see it as more of a win-win for everybody. Again, here's one for males, just to show you it exists. It's very similar. It's just the size of the font is how trainable it is. One distinction that I feel like is important to make, because parents always ask about this, is you see that strength here is equally as trainable throughout all stages of life. And it's distinguished from this word here, hypertrophy. So hypertrophy just means like muscle size. So if you play a sport where mass is advantageous, for example, like football, then, that would be a critical window in which you really want to invest in size training versus strength training. You want to be doing that at all stages of growth and development. And it's important for parents I find, to distinguish between strength and size. Like you could be really strong and not big. Likewise, you could be very big and kind of just barely strong. Like both of those realities exist, but oftentimes colloquially, they just kind of get mushed in together as like, oh, if you're big, you're strong, or if you're strong, you're big. And that's just not the case when you're dealing at a granular level with athletes. And this next concept, I'm only going to go over a couple, like I said, is injury prevention and reduction. And this is usually the one that the athletes care the least about and the parents care the most about. Um, what I'm kind of illustrating here in this slide is we're just pretending we're looking at 3 years of an athlete's career. And of course, in crew, like we're not dealing with 8-week seasons, right? We get that. It's just a slide to make an example. So you can ignore the fact that this is saying like 8 weeks, of a season, okay? But the green bar here represents your body's stress, okay? Your body's stress. And as the season goes on, it's year round in some sports, most of the months, obviously in crew. And as the season goes on, your body stress goes up and up and up. And that's what the bar is kind of showing here. It's increasing as you get further in the season, especially if like your sleep sucks, if your nutrition sucks, if you don't take care of yourself common sensibly, that stress will continue to go up. And then you'll reach some injury threshold. You will cross the line at the point at which your body's stress reaches that capacity and you just get hurt. Okay. Well, the point of our training and what we're trying to do with crew athletes in particular is we're trying to separate these two lines. We are trying to raise the injury threshold and lower the body stress. And a good example of how that happens with an intervention would be, for example, in the stroke for a crew athlete, you want to hold the torso. And again, I'm not a skills coach. This is more Coach Beth's and Jared's domain, but I understand enough to know that you want to hold that torso position as you're extending the knees and the hips at the same time. You don't want to be bent over. After a while of doing that with bad technique, if you are kind of bent over in an egregious type of way, you're going to get some kind of low back pain or some kind of spinal injury. You need to be able to hold the torso position throughout the stroke. And there's different laybacks, I understand, but when you're pulling, you need to hold the torso position, okay? And the ability to hold that torso position is based on a physical attribute. It's not a skill to hold that. It's a muscular attribute that can be trained through training. And although that's common sense, I think it should be common sense, you just be surprised, or at least I'm surprised, how oftentimes that doesn't get applied in real life. Well, if I have to hold this torso position as a crew athlete, and as I'm rowing, I need to be able to do that, and I need particular specific core strength to do that. Why am I not working on muscular strength of the torso and the spine? Why am I not dedicating more effort and more time during the week into being able to hold these positions through stability training? It's not something that comes just naturally, and it's definitely not something you can just coach them into. You can talk about cueing and body position, but you still need the underlying stability and strength and to be able to hold that position. That's where we come in. And so the goal here, and I just gave one example, but I could go on for endless examples of different sports and different mechanics. But the point being is that we want to get athletes as early as possible so that we could essentially try and bulletproof them as the years go by to make it really hard to get hurt, to the point where your body is so physically resilient that even if your stroke technique is bad, it takes you so much longer to get hurt because we've separated these two lines so much. We've built up your physical capacity, your absolute capacity, that it just takes that much more bad technique for longer to actually break something, to actually get hurt. So that's one way of looking at it, okay? Now, of course, you don't want that to happen. You want good technique at all times, and so you want to never get hurt. And that's where this good partnership comes in between having solid skill coaches like NorCal has and solid physical coaches like we have. Putting those together is where you get this graph to come alive. It's where you get this illustration to become a reality. Okay. I'm going to skip these and get right to here. So this is a really important one. This is the final one that I'm going to show. It's the idea of skill versus physical training. Now, what we mean by skill is exactly what it sounds like. In volleyball, it could be how you hit the ball. In crew, it could be a handle position on the erg, or how the handle's directed. Like, do you pull it back to your chest? Do you pull it lower? Good and bad positions. Be hand position on the oar. It's all the techniques that go along with a good stroke. Or in other sports, the techniques of how you hold the bat or the tennis racket. And so that's kind of what we're talking about, skill. And then physical is exactly what it sounds like. We're talking about physicality. So we're talking about the raw endurance ability of the athlete, the raw strength ability of the athlete, the raw power ability, agility, coordination, explosiveness, like these types of things. And interestingly, when you I get these lists here just showing examples from random sports, okay? But interestingly, if you ask sport coaches, so people like Coach Beth, Coach Jared, if you ask sport coaches around the world or at different sports from in our country, Boston to LA, we'll take crew, we'll zoom in on that. If you ask crew coaches from Boston to LA, like which is more important, meaning specifically which set of attributes here discriminates more the better performers versus the worst performers. So if I were to measure and quantify the athlete's stroke technique and skill on the boat, on the erg, and I were to quantify their just raw strength, their power, their endurance, these types of things, their etc. I don't know. I just got a little message said recording stop. So I hope it's all fine.
That was my fault. Sorry.
That's all good. So if you were to quantify these two groups of metrics and then see, okay, which group of metrics better discriminates and predicts, again, the starters versus the non-starters, the A team versus the C team, the better versus worse. What you're going to find if you ask crew coaches this question is that generally there's going to be somewhere around a 50-50 split. They will either say like, well, I think it's half skill dominant and half physicality, dominant, because obviously endurance plays a big part, clearly in crew. Or they'll go even more. Or some of them will be like, I think it's 60-40. It's like 60% based on your physicality and like endurance and power per stroke and these things. And the other 40% is your technique, right? And so either way, regardless of where you draw that percentage and that threshold, the point is still here that all sport coaches in the sport of crew are placing a huge importance and priority on physicality. And yet when you look what's happening in the crew community, very little percentage of crew parents are signing their kids up to do formal training in physicality or athleticism. In fact, you have tons and tons of effort and investment going on in skill training. And for some athletes, barely anything, or some not at all, especially the younger ages, in the physicality or athleticism training. And yet the sport coaches are clearly saying that that's a massively important thing. Some are saying that it's half important, which if you just apply that in real life with just common sense, like if a sport coach is telling you that variable X is half important as variable Y, but yet you spend all your time focused on variable Y, like something's wrong there. Like we're underachieving hugely. And so this again is why I think it's just so cool that Coach Beth like already knew this and found us and was like, we need to do something about that because it's so important. We need to find some experts who focus on this and get our athletes doing this because as she acknowledged, to us in that initial meeting is like, this is not what I do for a living. I'm a skills coach. I focus on, the left side of the equation here. And so either way, that's kind of like the sticking point to stop and talk about is like, that's what we're leading to in the sense that parents may intuitively understand that, endurance is important, right? So I got to work on endurance. I got to have endurance, but eventually at some point, it's not going to matter if your power per stroke is terrible, right? Like you could have great endurance. You could be like not winded at the end of the 2K or whatever the race may be. But if you didn't go anywhere, if you're slow, it doesn't matter. Like you need a power per stroke. And that power per stroke is predicated on what the absolute force is. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and try to use my hands here because it makes I can better demonstrate that. So stop sharing screen. Okay. So if I just use my hands to kind of make a slope, the way fatigue works, and this is the part that would hopefully lead you to the conclusion that, okay, power per stroke matters a ton, we need to do something about it with strength training, power training, etc., is that the way fatigue works is it's very like slope. For some reason, in the crew community, particularly amongst parents, I find that there's this idea that seems to be, well, if I can just maintain my wattage throughout the race, like that's the important thing. And I've heard that said to me to my face by crew parents and in different clubs. They're like, well, if I can just maintain my wattage and if I have like a good wattage and just kind of hold that, that's the key. And that is just so not the case at all. Like the way fatigue is working is that it's much more of an exponential drop off. What you want is actually a really high maximal forceability, a really high power, and then you expect it to drop off more because your ending average power per stroke will be so much higher than if you just maintain a slow pace all the way out. And that distinction is like where the rubber meets the road. Like that's the point we really want to drive home. It's like you have to train that max forceability, and you don't get that doing more endurance work on the erg. you don't get that just going for runs, in the Stanford dish. Like, you don't get that by just doing box jumps up and down for 50 reps. Like, you have to actually train your neuromuscular system to have a max force, like increase the capacity. Now, I'm not talking about turning like crew athletes into power lifters or football players. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a specific way that you strength train that increases the absolute forceability, the absolute max power per stroke, so that as the natural inevitable fatigue happens, the average of all that is much higher than it would be if you just maintained this wattage. Like, you have to increase the max capability. And that's the part that gets missed because we're not doing enough strength and power training. And interestingly as well is that even when we do attempt to do some max strength and power training, what it ends up being is just more endurance work. Like, we just get dumbbells and we just go for 10 minutes up and down. Like, I did strength training. It's like, no, you didn't do strength training. You just did more endurance work with a dumbbell. And so we're trying to change the way crew athletes think about this puzzle piece, the physicality puzzle piece. We're trying to get what Coach Beth and Coach Jared already know. We're trying to get it in the minds of parents to do something about it. And of course, there's logistics involved, and like I get that, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But like, that's just from an ideological level. That's kind of where we're coming from, as a group. We're trying to just promote that message out there. So I'm going to stop there because they told me to keep it 15 minutes, and I think I already went over that. So I'll hit timeout and we'll do parent Q&A, or maybe Coach Beth or Jared want to say something, and then we can go back and forth.
I think Sam, that was awesome. I just want to say that we asked Sam to come because we believe that strength training is its own thing, and getting the kids power per stroke, that is what brings the erg score down. Yes, we also need endurance. Yes, we also need cardio. Yes, we also need technique, but without power, like you don't have that's where you're going to gain the most benefit. And we do realize that, like, we practice a lot. We do realize that in order to implement this, we may have to give kids a day off, and we are talking about that. But if there's only 2 or 3 kids doing it, then it doesn't really do us a good idea to give everyone the day off to go strength train, right? But if everyone's going to do strength training, then it makes more sense. So that's sort of one of the things I realize it's an issue. But that is, if you guys just want to unmute yourselves and ask questions of Sam or of me. I don't see Jared on, but he has little children, so we all can give him that excuse.
How old are his kids? I didn't even know you had kids. How old are his kids?
Little.
I think he is on.
Oh, Jared, are you on?
Oh no, that's a Jared. Sorry, different.
I don't think he's on. So anyhow, does anybody have any questions for Sam?
What would what types of activities would they be doing when they meet with you, Sam?
Like, what is the training involved? So
yeah, like what would a typical session be? Like length and yeah.
So it might actually be helpful if I just answer this question, but like on the oomph degree, because I bet people are going to ask this different versions of the same question. And so let me just kind of tell you what our intake process is, and I'll answer that with what you just said embedded in that. So we start with an assessment, okay? And all athletes do this, all new athletes. It takes about 2 hours, and there's 3 parts to that assessment. The first part is like a growth and orthopedic section. So we do some growth measurements. The parent, you have to bring with you their annual growth heights from their yearly doctor visits, like just the standing heights, that's it. And what we're trying to ascertain from that is what stage of puberty they're in, for the reason I said earlier. It's like we want to plot them on that curve and realize, like, okay, where are you? Because that needs to be some of the specific target. It definitely dictates a lot of the program design, especially for our pediatric age athletes, versus like our maybe 18-year-old athletes, like post-puberty or just at the tail end of puberty. That matters like a little bit less. But as you know, like people get into crew like around 8th, 9th grade. So it still matters, at that point. So we do that, okay? The second part of the assessment is the performance piece. We do a bunch of specific fitness testing, kind of in this realm that I was talking about. We'll look at some explosiveness measures. And what we're doing with that collection of metrics is just building an objective profile. And then we compare the athlete to other athletes, their age and gender, both nationally and internationally. And the reason for that is primarily just for them, for the athlete's sake, because what athlete doesn't want to see their progress tracked and improved over time? Like, it's a huge confidence boost, especially in sports where there's like a centimeter gram second minute, mark, uh, which they love that a lot more, even more than our team sport athletes for that obvious reason. So we do that for them. It sets a baseline of improvement. The kind of the back end reason why we do that objective performance profile is just when my wife and I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, I just found out real quick that all the parents out here love objectivity and ROI. So that was the other reason we do that. And then the third part of the assessment is the just overview. We just go over like everything I just said. That's the parents' time to blast away with a million questions. It's a flat rate of $200. So that way parents don't feel like they're on the clock or anything. But more or less it takes about 2 hours. Just depends on what you want to talk about at the end. Then from there, once the assessment's over, we do 3 initial training sessions. And these are one-on-one, so the athlete can learn to read their individualized program, understand what our coaching cues are, just like how we operate, how we train. For the younger athletes, that's even more important to learn how to train. For the older athletes, that's more like getting acclimated to how we train. It's a very intimate setting. We get to know the athletes very well. This is no group training here. After those initial 3 onboarding training sessions, then the coach to athlete ratio goes to 2-on-1. Okay, so it remains an individualized training model. Again, intimate setting. You're not paired with anyone, and we don't do group training. And like what that 2-on-1 just means is, for example, say there was like 10 athletes in the facility at once. There'd be 5 coaches, and we're all taking you through your individualized programs at the same time. Like, for example, we had Charlotte Jett, was just here a couple hours ago. She was here with another BHS senior basketball player, and she was doing her own program. He was doing his own program, and I was coaching both of them at the same exact time. So each person's doing their own thing. It doesn't matter who else is in the room. And the frequency is totally dependent. It's completely flexible. There is no fixed or rigid schedules. You could come different days and different times every single week if you wanted. You can have a rigid schedule if you want one, but there's no like schedule. Like, you're not signing up for Tuesday and Thursday at 4 or something like that. In terms of the sessions themselves, it's really dependent on that assessment. So some athletes will need more strength. Some athletes will need more strength and power. Some athletes will just need more power. And I'm speaking more about crew now here. Almost never does a crew athlete show up with not enough endurance. So that would be weird if they did happen. And so that just is not our experience. Like, we almost never have a crew athlete doing endurance training. So that's a part. Another big piece is the injury prevention piece. Like, some athletes show up as ticking time bombs because their technique's been so bad, or they have such a big orthopedic asymmetry that when I assess them, I can just tell, all right, you are a ticking time bomb. And so we actually need a deeper level of orthopedic intervention. And that's where a good sports PT comes in. And I've been vetting sports PT since I moved here, because a lot of allied health professionals are just hacks. But I found 2 that can really deliver like an actual permanent result and not try to trap you into like, weeks of rehab and stuff like that. Like, it's pretty acute. So we get those, and I will, in that case, refer out to them, and they're local. They're right here in San Carlos, the 2 that I'm talking about. But some other times we will get an athlete who's not like an orthopedic train wreck, but they just have some like asymmetries, which are of course inherent to a sport. And we work around that. We train that. We can shift those asymmetries a little bit, or stop them from getting worse or too profound to the point where it would create a problem. So those are the buckets that a specific training session would have, and it just depends on the individual as to how much of each of those buckets you're going to get. Yeah, and then what else can I tell you? Frequency. Oh, the cost for elementary school and middle school athletes, it's $75 a session, and for high school and college athletes, it's $100 a session. And all the sessions are 75 minutes long, regardless of what grade you're in. So yeah, that's kind of a brief overview, but I think that'll answer preemptively a lot of other questions that were similar.
Thank you. That was great.
Do you have a recommended schedule, or is that based on the assessment? Like, is there like a minimum twice a week, maximum you'd suggest 4 times a week, something like that?
So in the summertime, we see crew athletes like almost every single day. Like, like Reese is one I was just talking about, Coach Beth about, like, she's there every day. Like, some of the girls from NorCal like went hard this whole summer. We saw them every single day, and it made a massive difference. During the school year, that's when we're going to see like once or twice. And it's not so much because like we believe that once or twice is like the perfect optimal strategy for everyone. It just tends to be the way Silicon Valley families like allow for it. Like that seems to be like the frequency. You do want to put, if you're coming twice a week, what I tell parents is you want to put one of those when you're more fresh, like when there's less going on. And you actually want to put another one of those on this same day as a practice, a heavy practice, something like that. So you can consolidate training stress in the body. There's more recovery pre and post. If you're coming once a week, just get it when you can get it. But yeah, we generally see during the school year, like once or twice a week, like it's twice is better for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. We just want to build that capacity and that power per stroke thing. But not every family has different sports goals, right? Like some athletes have like coding going on, music, so those other things. So it might not be a different commitment level. So once or twice is generally what ends up happening for crew athletes.
Thank you.
If you don't have a set day of the week, how do you, book those times? Like if I want to come, tomorrow at 1 and next week I want to come Wednesday at 3.
Yep, we just use a scheduling software like most businesses, and you just go on there and you just book your sessions. I mean, what we have learned is that Silicon Valley parents like really love their schedules, and it's all about that efficiency thing. So we let you book up to 2025 if you want to, and that is absolutely a thing. Some parents absolutely do that. So you can book as far out as you want, and yeah, you just book in there, and that's that. Most are not crazy though. Most are not booking until 2025. We do have normal parents.
And you have available slots according to how many coaches you have on hand that day, for example? That's how it works?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have the same amount of coaches at all times. Like one thing that I had mentioned to Coach Beth is like we would absolutely be very open to hiring dedicated sports scientists just for like those specific time slots, because it seems to be that's Friday and Saturday for not just NorCal crew athletes, but just all crew athletes, like seem to be that Friday, Saturday, and then there's like a random day during the week that if they're not coming on Saturday, they'll squeeze it in there. But yeah, as things go and as the partnerships improves and as race times get better and everybody's winning, that can definitely be a thing where we would like, as a group, as two clubs, like decide, all right, like these are going to be the days that we're going to purposely increase the staff so that there are more spots for here. But for now, we always have the same amount of coaches on staff, and so it's not like changing every day. It's the same amount.
One more question, is that okay? Yeah. So do you get the athletes to the point that, like, let's say we have like access to a weight room at home or at the gym or something, and coming in is not always that practical. Do you get them to a point that they could go off on their own and train and carry out some of that training on their own so that they're not losing the momentum of the training just because they can't come in that day? Or, I mean, do you try to get to the point that they're also self-sufficient and can do that independently in another gym or another place? Is that kind of the objective eventually?
No, that is not the objective, but that is exactly what happens, like as a symptom of being trained and coached at a high level. So we don't do home programs. Like we're not sending home a home program and here, do this in your basement and blah, blah, blah. Everything's done in-house, but the athletes haven't gone through our system are going to be way more educated on like their own bodies and what is good versus bad for them, that they will absolutely be able to reproduce elements of what we do here at home. And that goes for our college athletes too. Like those that have gone through our system, they go off to college and they report back that they feel self-sufficient. Like they're able to understand now, if you're rowing in college, you're going to have a conditioning coach that kind of takes care of itself. But hopefully you have a good one. But in summertime or in the wintertime, if you're they tend to be like, all right, I got a good idea of where I want to be. It's not like an intentional target. We're not handing out home programs and doing that. Everything's done in-house.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Sam, that was awesome.
I'm curious, like a lot of the research out there says that if you practice at a low heart rate, at a moderate level, that's when they've shown, practically every published paper shows that that's when they have maximum output, not by pushing very hard. So, I mean, from what you're saying, that seems to contradict practically every exercise physiology paper that's out there.
So what you're talking about is metabolism and like energy systems and like how that, works. So yeah, of course, if you're building the engine, whether it's like an aerobic engine or something like that, I'm assuming you're a physiologist or doctor or something like that. So if you're building that, aerobic engine, like certainly that's going to keep the power, but your ability to sprinting is a good way of thinking about this. Is like when I do my fastest sprint, okay, and you look at the beginning of a game, and then you look at the end of a game, like the sprint at the end of the game is going to be significantly slower than the sprint at the beginning of the game. And I'm just using a team sport reference here, okay? But the athletes whose average sprint is higher, like if you want to look in the literature paper, you just type in repeat sprint ability, like this would be a reference point for what I'm saying is like the ones that have this higher drop off, so to speak, is like the slope is different. That is where the ending point like is higher. So you kind of want that, person. Now in this case here, as Coach Beth is trying to say, the power per stroke is critical, but that power per stroke, if your neuromuscular system can't produce enough force, it doesn't matter that you're maintaining like that higher power output. Because of course, if you build your aerobic engine, you're going to maintain a higher output for longer, but it's the absolute value that we're trying to say matters. It's the absolute value that is what is just being kind of like not focused on, with the athletes. And we're not talking about powerlifting here. Again, we're not talking about like, can you squat a house? Like this is not what we're talking about. We're just talking about the neuromuscular's ability to produce force at a higher level. And so that as the inevitable fatigue happens, like that ending point is higher versus being like, okay, great. I built this huge aerobic engine and I've maintained this, power level for longer, a higher power level than if I didn't have an aerobic engine because the power level is higher. But it doesn't matter if that whole absolute level number is slower. So you need both. And that's where I think they do a great job as a crew committee of rowing and doing the endurance work, but the strength training just kind of either drops off or they wait till like a sport coach like brings it up and they're like, oh, you should strength training, you should do some power training. And that's what we're trying to promote is to start with both, to think about doing both.
Any other questions for Sam?
I have one. Would you ever consider opening it up on a Sunday for us? I know you're closed on Sundays, but that is the one day that the kids don't have crew right now.
Yeah, there's definitely if we get to that point and that's like a thing and that's can become a thing, then yes, right now we're closed on Sunday just because we don't want employees to quit their job. They're already working so much. But yeah, we're just closed on Sundays out of convenience, and that's just the way the business has scaled over time. But for sure, the goal is to be open on Sundays, open every day of the week. We just haven't been able to justify, that yet.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what's your opinion on recovering from like a pretty hard workout? Or like if you train, if you have a practice for rowing and then I come to like your gym or something and then you need to recover, like how much time do you need? Because we only have one day, like Sunday, to like recover from like pretty hard workouts.
Yep. So recovery is like a very individualized thing. And to make like a more high level example, like if this was a college setting that had like some certain tech, like different nervous system measures, like autonomic nervous system measures, like what we would do is generally like we would measure kind of what kind of overtrained you are or what kind of fatigue level you have. Like, are you more sympathetic or parasympathetic? And then we would do certain interventions based on the type of recovery you need. So like not everyone benefits the same way from an ice bath or an Epsom salt bath or simple foam rolling. Like it is an individualized thing. At this level, we're not doing that because that tech is really expensive and we don't have that. So it's just way more general. If an athlete comes in and we subjectively assess through just like simple talking to them, that they are just trash for that day, we're obviously not going to then go and be like, all right, working on max power and max strength, type of thing. It may be the day where we do more moderate intensities, but we still get a little bit out of them. It really is an individualized thing. I'm hesitant to say like all athletes should just sit there and foam roll or do light aerobic work or stretch. Like it really is individual. At the younger levels, like middle school, elementary school, I feel more comfortable with generic advice, such as like, hey, just sleep, like stop doing the 49,000 hours of sports and running around like crazy and just rest, like go take a nap, type of stuff. And as you get older, I think that's when it gets more individualized.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sam, just one thing on that note, I'm just going to talk about my kid in particular. So Charlotte is coming to see you guys once a week, and she was coming on Thursdays, but I know the girls do a pretty hard day of testing on Friday. So now she comes generally on Tuesdays because she knows that like the workouts, the days around that are more are not as taxing. So I think some working with your coach maybe and figuring out like what the right day is to add precision into the weekly training probably makes sense too, because I think that the programming is pretty consistent at NorCal. So that's just to add in.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the individual nature. So like in Charlotte's case, like her body may be reacting differently than a different athlete, doing the same thing. Like, and you really want to know like how you react and how you feel and plan accordingly.
All right, any other questions? All good.
Is this a like a pay as you go kind of thing? What is the commitment?
Sorry, what was the say that again?
Is this a pay as you go kind of thing, or is there some sort of commitment that you ask for?
Oh, yeah. So this is just a monthly thing. It's pay as you go in terms of a month. So you buy some sessions for the month and then you use them during that month. Simple as that.
Sweet.
Yep. There's no long-term commitments. Like I said, we're kind of tuned into the whole convenience factor out here.
Perfect.
Can you share the pricing specifically?
Yep, like I said earlier, it's $75 a session for elementary and middle school, $100 a session for high school and college. All the sessions are 75 minutes long.
And the initial assessment was 200.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep. You got it.
All right. Well, we had one more quick thing to talk about, but if Sam, you guys have any more questions for Sam, we want to make sure he gets all his info in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
Cool. Thanks for having me. And like I said, what was most exciting about this was the fact that this was initiated not by me or any of the parents here. It was just like the coaches at NorCal that sought this out. So that's always great. You guys have, and I'm not just saying this because I mean it. Like I deal with sport coaches across sports, individual sports, team sports.
What? I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at the road.
Oh, cool.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Talk soon.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So parents, really quick before you go is we have this German team coming and we wanted to share with you, if you have a minute, about the summer, but also I still really need 6 more German boys housed. If anyone has the ability to do that, it's actually a really simple thing. I'll share my screen. Wait, here it is. I think it's that one. The Germans are amazing, and they're coming when they're during the school day. The German coaches will either pick them up at your house or pick them up at your kid's school, whatever needs to be done. We make it really simple for you, and they're gone all day till the end of practice, where we return them to you. So all you have to do really is feed them dinner and lunch and give them a place to sleep. They don't need their own room or anything special, but they're really fun, and it is a lifetime of kind of friendship that the kids will develop, right? So we wanted to show you this summer, we're going to take 2 trips, and we just want to tell you guys, since you already were on a meeting, we figured we'd do this super quick. we're gonna do a Malaga exchange and also in Germany. So I believe that when kids do a sport that there's a lot of time spent doing super serious, win, be fast, do all that. And sometimes you should do a sport for fun. And that's what I think the summers are for. I don't think it gets in the way of your future in the sport either. And I'll explain that in a minute. But the exchanges are, it allows the kids to go overseas, meet new people, develop new skills, row in different kinds of boats. And when we go to Spain, they can also speak the language. So in Germany or Spain, it's just, they're life-changing experiences, right? The coaches are there, we're very involved with it, but every single athlete that I've ever taken to Europe to go on the rowing tour with the Germans, or to go to Spain and do language and meet new friends, it's been life-changing for them.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry, my Siri is talking to me. So just so you know, I've taken kids overseas, I believe since 2006, possibly before. I've taken probably upwards of 100 to probably closer to 200 athletes overseas over the years. And so this is not a new thing. This is something I've done for a very long time. So we're not making this stuff up. In Germany, there's two programs. We're going to go to Germany, and the Germans are coming here, and we're going to host them. They're going to row with us. This picture is kind of cool. When the kids go down the rivers, they have to go through locks, and that is a photo of them going down a lock in the boats, and they have to hold the boat steady with the oars parallel to the boat. And it's a pretty fun thing. It's really hard on their abs, and they love it. So they'll row. When they go to Germany, we will row down a river. We'll row between 30 and 60 kilometers a day. We'll spend the night in a different town every night with a German high school team called the Ratsgymnasium. Those are the kids that are coming this year. The kids that are coming now will be the hosts for our kids when we go to Germany. So it will be a reciprocal thing. And our kids will get to meet them because we'll do a bunch of stuff with them. It's a totally different exchange. Obviously, don't take offense to this, but not that many people want to learn German. So the kids will learn German, but probably not the words we want them to know. So they'll have but it's quite an experience. In Spain, it is an exchange. The kids go to Spain, the other kids come back here to do an exchange with your family. So that is something a little bit different, but they also get the opportunity to spend that time in a family, learning the language. The Spanish row all different types of boats. They row coastal rowing, they do the Spanish fixed seat rowing, they do the flat water rowing. So it's a totally different experience, and it's something just to think about for the summer. The way we're planning the trips this year is we'll be able to do them back to back. So if your child wants to go to Germany and then go to Spain, we will be able to do that. But just so you know, a lot of the kids in the pictures that from the German trips, and I've coached at different programs, and they've now gone to Princeton, to Harvard, to Stanford, to Berkeley, to UCLA, all sorts of colleges all across the country. So spending a summer enjoying themselves and learning about just enjoying the sport, right? And learning about themselves is never a detriment to where they're going to go to college. It only can make it better. And now I have to, so yeah, I still need housing for 6 boys. Anybody who would like to house a boy, I would be more than grateful. And because I don't know what I'm going to do with him if I don't have housing. So that is it, but we will make it super, super simple. And we wanted to share that with you because I know people start planning for summers very early, and we just wanted you guys to have a chance to know what was coming up. Maud, you had a question?
I was wondering if the session was recorded because we were in a place where we didn't have good reception at the beginning of the call.
Yes.
Excellent.
I have a question. So I would love for my daughter to go on exchange, but she wants to do these rowing programs in the summer that make her a better, stronger, amazing rower. And well, I don't have much say in the matter in the end, but what do I do?
Well, let me tell you a couple things about that. A 1-week program will not change your child's trajectory. If they want to go to one of these, whatever camps at Stanford, it's to go look at the campus. They don't learn that much of what those programs. That's been my experience over the years, is the kids get way more out of going to overseas and doing things like that. Just growth in their ability to learn to row. They're learning different techniques with different kids from different countries. It's very different, and it's quite eye-opening to them. And I think that, yeah, if they want to go spend, I don't know what, at Sparks and do all those camps, yeah, they can do it. I think that it's not as big a bang for the buck, just as a point of reference. So
Maybe you can pass that message on.
I will happily pass that message on. My biggest fear of these rowing camps is, and I'll just be super honest, is I've sent a lot of kids to rowing camps and they come back and they get injured because the kids are going to a camp that the coach only really cares about 1 week of, right? Like, they don't care about and this sounds bad, but it's just true, right? They're not in it for the long haul. Like, we're in it for 4 years of your child. We want your kid to be successful. We want them to be healthy. There's all those things that we're in it for. And I think balance is the most important thing that they get, right? So yeah, we push them hard and we work hard and we go race and we have a great time and we go fast, but there's also that time you got to take a little time off, right? You have to take a little time off. Doesn't mean you shouldn't row, doesn't mean you shouldn't work out. It just means you have to come back to the enjoyment of it, right? I grew up in Squaw Valley, Sun Valley, and the French Alps. So I skied. That was what I had to do. That was my daycare. The first time I enjoyed skiing after racing for 15 years or whatever I raced for was probably like 8 to 10 years later, when I could just go ski and enjoy myself, right? Because I never got the opportunity to just enjoy myself. And I think that's what's important, is creating enjoyment for the kids. So yes, those are my thoughts.
Beth, I'll just add one thing. I think the other thing with the summer programs is kind of to your point, they're as strong as the coaches that are there. And a lot of times you don't even know who's coaching. I'm not going to reference any of the specific camps, but they don't tell you who's running those things until you get there. So I think that's another piece of it.
Yeah. I mean, usually the college ones are run by the assistants. And sometimes they're really like the volunteer assistant, because that's how they get paid. So there's a lot of things that go on in the college camps and some of those camps.
So maybe the idea is to see it as a different experience of rowing, just for the experience of some different scenery, different places doing it.
Yeah, it changes them. They learn, the Spanish row different. The Germans row a different stroke than the Americans. And when they get in the boats with them, they really learn a lot. Like, why is that beneficial? How do they move the boat? So there's a lot of really interesting things that they come away with.
When will you know about the timing? When during the summer?
It will probably be right the middle of June, and if I think with Germany would be somewhere right around the middle of June and around the 1st of July, and then Spain would happen right after that, somewhere around the last week of June to the beginning, or to July, middle of July. And then the exact dates obviously haven't been picked, but and then the Spanish kids come here when our kids leave Spain. The goal is to have everyone on the same flight coming back.
Each is about a 2-week program.
Yes. I think 2 to 2.5 weeks. Yeah. I've taken kids to Europe for upwards of 4 to 6 weeks in one group, and that's too long. It's always good to leave while they still want to stay. So 3 weeks is like that number where you're like, probably time to go home. So 2.5 weeks is kind of the perfect number, So
Is there any kind of formal language classes for them? Like something? where they-
In Spain, no, but they live with a Spanish family. And so that it's amazing how much they pick up really quickly. And it's really, more than anything, it's attuning their ear to the language. And that's what they really get out of it.
Sorry, are you guys going to be sending out more information on the details and signups for that soon?
We will. We're trying, we're just putting together some dates and trying to finalize some things with the people. And when the Germans get here, we'll get more information from them.
Great, thank you.
So, that is. Any other questions?
Malaga for rowing is not it's not too shabby as a summer plan.
Yeah. I mean, just I took my son when he was in 8th grade, and then when he went back as a senior, we got somewhere and he goes, "Oh, my friends are picking me up, so I'm out. I'm gonna go hang out with my friends." And I'm like, "How cool is that you arrive in a town in Germany and you have friends and you're 18? That's pretty cool." So, it is quite lifetime friendships, especially with the internet now. So, but yeah, if anyone wants to house a German, be great. It'd be great. So that was it. We didn't want to keep you guys too long. But thank you all for your time, and feel free to reach out with any questions.